Oh, there we are.
Had me concerned there for a moment.
Yes, it was kind of not really a politically correct term, I guess, but it was the black screen of death there.
Gee, either that or other people are watching us closely. Well, welcome to the BORDERPOL Journal.
Yes.
He's Bob. I'm Tom. This is the 10th day of July, 2024. And this is episode 22, or as they say in French, vendu.
Vendu.
Yeah. Vendu.
Vendu.
Third season. And we're getting remnants of rain here from Barrel. It's coming down good.
Yeah. Well, I guess you might need the rain. We've had our rain. We've now reached the point where we're starting to think that maybe January wasn't too bad. We could use some more rain. We just can't seem to get this right. Much like politics in the world today.
Well, it's been a pretty eventful week since we last commiserated.
Well, you know, I was kind of thinking that if we delayed our broadcast just a tiny bit, that we might actually break that barrier of finding the good news.
I got bad news for you.
The bad news is there's no good news.
The bad news is there's no good news. Well, look, the good news is we're all vertical at the moment.
Very true, yeah.
The bad news, of course, is that those who we have entrusted our lives with are still around.
I don't see it getting much better. But.
No, we have seen our friends to the south of us deal with a leadership crisis of historical
proportions. Yeah.
Yes, proportions. And we're talking pre-production. I was saying that, 100 years ago, when Woodrow Wilson was president, or during the First World War and afterwards, he was stricken and was basically for lack of a better term, unable to carry out his duties as president, but they kept it a big secret. And his wife essentially ran the White House until the next election, because this is before we had radio or TV or the internet, and they were able to basically hide the fact that he was not compos mentis.
Yeah, unable and unfit. He was just
yeah.
He was what he was. Yeah,
that's right. And he managed to struggle through that. But interesting enough, during his presidency, they invented the income tax. That didn't a temporary one at that.
Yes, yeah, much like everybody else's temporary income tax.
That's right.
I would have thought, by now that we would have paid off the First World War, but obviously I'm wrong.
Still paying for it. So there is a historical precedent to having a spouse of a president running the show. Now, I don't know if Jill Biden is going to be able to do this for much longer in terms of the running interference, I guess, is the best way to describe it.
Yeah. I guess it goes down 100 years ago when President Wilson was in. You were right. I mean, there wasn't the plethora of cell phone cameras and boom microphones and knickknacks and everything that we have today. And I guess the other part of that is that 100 years ago, people were quite content with politicians running their lives, where now it's almost to the point where we hope they do something stupid so we can attack them and see if we can get them out that way. So I was reading the local paper the other day, and some individual who was, I don't know what their political bent is or isn't, but they were basically saying, yeah, I don't like the current government. I don't like the other guy who's propping up the current government, but I'm not sure I like a guy who is running around with alliteration. Is the potential anointed one. Why can't we get to the point where we have some really, really good ideas? Like, if you don't like brand X, what are you going to do to fix brand X? You know, don't make a cutesy little thing. I guess that's what we've always thought. When are the grown-ups going to enter the race and dig us back out into level ground here? And I don't see that happening. I tell all my friends, you know, I can't vote for the current party. I can't vote for the party that's supporting the current party, which leaves one choice, but I really don't know if that particular party's the answer either. And it's kind of a catch-22, I guess.
Shouldn't be, though.
No,
there should be. Look, the history shows, very recent history, is that the ability to give the voters a choice has become very, very limited. For example, in the UK, which had their election just last week, you know that the Labour government basically said to the electorate, the incumbent government didn't do you any favors. And they bought into that, probably by saying, are you feeling better off today than you did when they came to power? And remember that they were in power for 14 years, okay, and have had 3 different prime ministers. Mm-hmm. So when Labour, which 5 years ago couldn't elect anybody dog catcher under Jeremy Corbyn and that gang, it was, you know, they have an absolute supermajority in Parliament and basically have swept out previous government.
Yeah.
And you know, people like Mr. Rishi are looking for another job very quickly, you know, the day after. And all that malarkey that they were presenting in the last weeks of that election in the UK, which, and I'll come to this in a minute, which reflects here in Canada, it didn't buy many votes. They were tossed out. Now, first past the post means that you have a dark horse candidate like Nigel Farage, who just decimated the Conservative vote, basically, which is why they lost the election. Yet, the Labour government that's been elected barely got 30% of the vote in the UK.
Yeah.
That means 70% of the folks there still didn't like what they were getting, but now they've got basically no choice for the next 5 years, because this crowd, representing 30+% of the population, will do whatever the heck they want to do. So there's one example. The other example, which took place on Sunday last, is in France, the second runoff election, where for the first round, the Le Pen and the right cleaned up there. They thought, oh, it's going to be a rout of the you know, France is going to go right, far right. All these, you know, Nazis will be marching down the streets of the Champs-Elysees, you know, crazy stuff. And next thing you know, Sunday comes along, and they do some tactical voting, and basically the far left and the left cleans up. And now you have a situation where nobody's in charge of anything in France. It's a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 split between the left, the right, and the middle, which essentially makes for no government whatsoever. So, and again, the party that got the most vote were the right of center parties, but they don't have any juice in this parliament anymore than the bunch up in London. So again, it's what does the voter end up with? Just a dreck of a government setup. So then you go across the Atlantic and you watch what's going on in Washington with Joe Biden and the Democrats, and you just have to shake your head and go, okay, what next?
Well, you know, and again, talking about anomalies, when was that? Just after Brian Mulroney stepped down and Kim Campbell took over the reins, and there was an election.
You mean
Conservative
negligee,
government
Campbell?
decimated, right? I mean, they got what, 3 seats if they were lucky.
Yeah.
Very, very.
She
And
went so far as to do photo shoots in nightgowns.
or something, yeah. But I guess the point I'm making there is that, it sounds dire, it sounds dreadful. The sun still rose in the east, set in the west. And in spite of the fact that Her Majesty's loyal opposition at the time was an avowed separatist party,
That's right.
things seem
Right. But
still seem
but
to
you know, the same question is being asked in the United States as well as Canada. Are you better off today than you were 5 years ago? And unfortunately, the answer is no. To the vast majority of people, things just have got screwed up. Now, to hear folks like our illustrious Prime Minister say, well, it's a global thing, but I'll solve it by taxing you into oblivion and we'll save the world. That's, of course, falling on deaf ears because nobody buys into that. Then you have a real questionable ability to lead in the U.S. The president there is highly unlikely, I think, to actually be around in November to be the candidate. I think their own people will both. I mean, hey, listen, it's a blood sport. Let's face it. But when I see people like Jake Tapper, who is now questioning the viability of his president to carry on, who until 3 weeks ago was entirely supportive with the status quo. There's something going on there where suddenly either the light's gone off in quarters where we're not privy to, or they're seriously wondering how they're going to deal with the three things that are falling down on everybody's heads, particularly in the Western democracies, which is the economy, the war, and immigration. Not necessarily in that order. Yeah. Those three things. Okay, those are. In fact, I would even put other issues ahead of even the war thing. But that's just all about assuaging certain groups. But let's just talk about immigration and the economy. These are kitchen table issues in North America, and probably as well in Western Europe. And none of these jokers is willing to say, well, look at what I've done for you, because they've done nothing for us. Okay, they talk over us. They talk in riddles, and you were saying even in some cases the opposition talks in cliches. I don't want to hear cliches. I don't want to hear slogans. I want you tell me what you're going to do to deal with immigration. Okay, in particularly in Canada and in the United States, we have the three U's: the unwelcome, the uninvited, and the ungrateful, who are showing up here in hundreds of thousands of numbers. Okay, and these are being welcomed to some extent by the uninformed and the uneducated as to where you're going to house, where you're going to find schools, where you're going to find jobs for literally millions of people who are showing up here.
Yeah.
Okay. So no responses from these guys who are, sorry, just I might lose my train of thought here, about what we're going to do for that group, which is now impacting on the social, economic, and cultural well-being of the host community. None of these people have the guts to say, you know what, we've screwed this up. Okay, we got to, thank you very much. Immigration is a good thing, but we got to put the brakes on, and we got to find out how to fix this. And it's not by deporting all the people who shouldn't be here, because no one's ever going to do that. Okay, no matter how
there's a money issue tied with that. Yeah,
but there's also a moral issue to that. You conned all these people to come here, and now you're going to kick them out? Come on, this is not how this works. But you're going to have to come up with some sort of solution, which means you shut the door to use the metaphor, and you start figuring out how to get these hundreds of thousands, not millions of people, to find their place in this society. Now, if they don't want to be in this society, given the rules of this society, which is fair play, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and get the hell out of here, we'll be happy to, give you a ticket out.
Yeah.
And that's what I would, but none of the people that I hear who talk about this particular issue have the balls to say we have to do this in a straightforward, transparent, and fair legal way. They come up with all kinds of goofball projects about, oh well, we have to invent projects for housing and do some financial wizardry to have school lunches for all the poor people that we've imported and blah blah blah. But this is nonsense. Sorry, I hadn't finished that thought.
But it does come back to, again, what you were saying, pre-production. All of this comes up with another U, the unintended consequences. And that's exactly what you've been saying. You can bring all these people in, you can do this, you can do that. But it's kind of like being in government where you promise, well, we'll build schools and everybody wants schools. We'll build hospitals because everybody wants hospitals. We'll have law enforcement because everybody wants to feel safe and secure. But at no point are we ever addressing the issue of there's only so much money in the bank. We can't continue to go on, even if we bring in 3, 4, 5 million people into this country. We can't continue to spend money that we don't have or can't produce or can't make. And if you want something, when I was growing up, if I wanted something, I had to save for it. I had to plan for it. We had to budget for it. And certain things didn't happen because there was something that we wanted that was your term, a greater good. That was what we were shooting for. So that's what we planned for. That's what we built. And now, the way the current governments are, particularly in the West, we'll just keep. Oh yeah, you want another 100 police officers? Yeah, we'll give you 100 police officers. Oh, you want another school? We'll build another school. Oh yeah, want a hospital? We'll build a hospital. But we can't seem to get over the idea that it's gimme, 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 and somewhere along the line, somebody's going to want to be paid.
Well, a famous Prime Minister of the UK, Margaret Thatcher, once said, everything works fine while you're spending someone else's. I'm paraphrasing. All this works when you're spending someone else's money, but when you run out of it, you got yourself a problem. Mm-hmm. So socialism works great when you're spending someone else's money. But I'm going to give you an example in microcosm, which we didn't talk about in pre-production because I forgot to give you the update here in Ontario. There is a strike at the local liquor stores, which is run by the province, called the Liquor Control Board of Ontario. Now I'm going to explain to you how upside down things are when it comes to this particular strike. The LCBO, as it's known, is a provincial monopoly, an entity to sell booze, because you can't sell hard liquor outside of that setup, which has been since Moses built, since Noah built the ark, mixed metaphors. Noah built the ark, we've had this LCBO thing where the government decides what you can drink, when you can drink, and where you can drink. And the outlet that sells this to you is a union-driven shop, So they're on strike because they believe they're not being paid enough to do two things: put bottles on a shelf and be at the cashier station. These people do better than minimum wage. It's a union shop. Some of the wages go as far as $35, $40 an hour to do what I just described: put bottles on a shelf and be a cashier. They're on strike, and the union vehemently, of course, opposed to any discussion by the province to privatize this quango. is saying that if it wasn't for the LCBO, teachers wouldn't be paid and hospitals wouldn't be built, because all the revenue that comes in by this monopoly is because this union shop, which is basically selling booze way over markup than it needs to in order to pay these union wages that nobody else gets. Okay, nobody works for minimum wage at the LCBO. Let me tell you, the standard minimum wage just doesn't exist. This is a union shop. Is a blatant lie, because in fact, if that liquor was sold in your local grocery store, the same taxes apply on that bottle of booze, whether it's sold by the the monopoly or by the grocery store. The only difference is the markup might be a little different, because the markup for a bottle of booze in this province is astronomical, because they have to pay these enormous wages to these union types to stack the bottles on the shelf and do the cash stuff. And by the way, the choice you have for various products there is not all that great, because some bureaucrat in Toronto decides what booze you might want to buy. Okay, so the long and the short of it is that the big lie is that if it wasn't for a monopoly, your teachers wouldn't get paid and your hospitals wouldn't get built, which is a complete and utter nonsense argument. So at the moment, you can't buy booze. If you're Joe Schmo, want to buy a bottle of scotch or whatever. But mind you, they were very careful to make sure that the restaurants still got their liquor, because it still comes from the same source, right? And these are the same people that chased away a lot of business 20 some years ago from this province, where there were various restaurant chains that were operating here. And we're wanting to import wine and booze and whatever on a wholesale basis to sell at the restaurants. And this is the same outfit said you can't do that without going through the LCBO. And you know what these people did? They said, fine, we're just going to close up shop and leave the province. And that's precisely what they did. Thousands of jobs were lost. Literally hundreds of restaurants will not just basically close shop. Boom, we're gone. So if you're wondering why there's no Olive Garden in Ontario, there's your reason.
Well, that and the fact too that as we're finding now, we can't hire the people, because nobody wants to go and wait on tables and do the bussing and cleanups and part of the reason that people are coming here was to do that work. And again, are they part of the invited ones or the uninvited ones? Are they the ones that are taking the jobs because they would take the jobs anyway? I don't know.
Well, I think to listen to crackpots like our current immigration minister, I won't even mention his name because I think he's a fool when it comes to migration policy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But, to compare the immigration selection of 20, 30, 40 years ago to today, it's an absolute, it's a non-starter. First of all, the folks that were coming then were handed a shovel or whatever, and they went out and they did whatever, and they worked their way up. Nobody coming today wants to be handed a shovel and go do brickwork or lay asphalt or do these or carpentry or plumbing. They don't exist. Okay, this is the dirty little secret of what happened with technology and the difference between 2024 and 1964. It's a very different world. Okay, mm-hmm. And so these folks already have a whole different view of what they're supposed to get when their feet touch the ground here. There's an expectation. This is where the other group that comes in is the ungrateful. Okay, because when we look at the history of immigration going back to the days of pre-industrial, if you will, Canada, whatever job came along, you took it. Okay, and you worked your way up. That group didn't have choice. If you didn't, you were out in the street. There was no program to give you a house. There was no program to give you a minimum salary to sit at home, look for a job. None of those things, these programs did not exist. It's not to say that that in some cases we moved ahead in our ability to be welcoming, but you can't do it with the kind of open-ended approach that we're doing now, because there was a big difference between dreaming up a program for 100,000 people and having that same program for 1.5 million people. It's just not possible. Okay, yeah. The makers are not enough in this country to supply funds to the takers. It's really that simple. Okay, so when you hear these crackpot program announcements for immigration, like you said to me in pre-production, that this joker now wants the universities to tell the government whether the students, quote unquote, are actually attending class. You can't be serious. You think that the universities are going to go into the immigration enforcement business? Are you nuts? What kind of nonsense is that? All the universities want to do is take as much money out of the pockets of the students coming in from overseas as they possibly can. That's this. Yeah. We've seen this now for 30 years, Well,
I know, and even here where we've got the schools that will gladly take the extra money that's coming from the overseas student, almost to the detriment of the kids that should be going to school here, because they were born here, they live here. All they're getting is the tax dollars from that kid, not the tax dollars plus from a foreign student. So,
and the whole scam of these so-called schools that were invented for the trades and what have you over the last 15, 20 years, it's just been a joke. These are worthless certificates or diplomas or whatever that these foreign
students now coming up with what they're calling a red seal that does have a lot more to it. And these are the ones that are not the learn how to hammer a nail on the head school. These are the ones where you're into aircraft mechanics, you're into air conditioning, refrigeration, plumbing, all those kinds of things. Where I know when I was working and we were overseas, we always got called out. Well, why can't my client Johnny Smith come to Canada as an engineer? He's got the qualifications, and it's nothing to do with us because the engineering society deems that they don't meet their requirements. So this is basically what I think that the trades have come to the point now where they're saying, we're being raked through the mud here, and we're going to have to set up some standards. We have the case of the truck driver that killed all those hockey players in Saskatchewan.
Mm-hmm.
That has now made calls not only on a provincial level but on a federal level to have some kind of regulation for, you just can't show up and say, yeah, I'm a truck driver, and get behind the wheel of a big tractor trailer unit and drive. There's a lot more coming into that now.
Yes.
I don't know how many times within the last 3 years there have been cases where big trucks have oversized loads hitting our overpasses and closing them down for extended periods of time, so they're checked for safety and structural damage, et cetera, et cetera. So this goes back again, I think, to what we're talking about with the plethora of yous. We're spending a lot of money to try and make the ungrateful grateful, to change people's minds from being unwelcoming to welcoming. But we had a big wake-up call, not just for the people of Calgary in the last couple of weeks, but I think we should be looking at this as a whole. If the water system in Calgary, main pipe breaks, has caused very, very close to mass hysteria, I would think, because people were told they can't drink water, they can't do this, they can't do that. How many other or cities and towns across the country have infrastructure that is at least 100 years old that is going to be, and we're putting nothing into these infrastructures to to keep them going. How many bridges, like even in the United States, the one bridge that fell, yeah, okay, a ship hit it. We're not looking after our own infrastructure to make sure that things are working and can get from point A to point B. Would going out and talking to people, being invited to come to this country because they have a skill, they have a job, they have a talent that's going to benefit us, as opposed to the ones that just say, "I'm here, deal with me." Well, you got some soul searching to do for sure.
Oh, there's no question, and there's, speaking of soul searching, to bring the discussion closer to home with our leadership in this country, is soul searching done by the backbenchers in Parliament needs to be looked at as well. We are in a precarious position where the leadership, political leadership, has gone off for 3 months holidays. I don't know what the hell kind of country we're running here, where they just decide that they're not going to be, running the business of the nation until end of September, because these overworked MPs have they're exhausted from acting like fools during question period. I'm really being facetious here, but the leadership in this country needs to have a wake-up call. And I noticed that some of the backbenchers in the caucus of the governing party have started to become squawking chickens in the barnyard. But the last bunch that made an appeal to the leadership to consider some changes to policy were completely rejected, or in fact not rejected, but totally ignored by the PM, while he does his waltz off to Washington at the NATO thing and talks foolishness there. But that's for another broadcast. I would ask any of our readers, listeners, viewers in Canada, send a little note off to your Liberal MP who's squawking about the leadership issue and ask him what he or she actually intends to do, because talk is cheap.
Very much so, yeah. I mean, you proved that before, right? When all of a sudden on April 1st, they all got the wage increase.
None of their hands shook at all. There was no, I won't take that check because come on. They took their raises and they kept shooting their mouth off. Those 8 caucus members that wrote and were ignored by the PM, if they had a spine, if they had principles, if they had the honest interest of their constituents, they would basically stand up. And I'm not asking them to cross the floor. I'm asking them to become independents in the House and just say, you know what, I'm done with this party. It doesn't represent my view. I'm not in caucus anyway, so to hell with you. I'll sit as an independent. And if enough liberals with guts to do that would stand up, you would see a sudden change in attitude,
I would think,
in the House.
Yeah. I would think so.
I'm not asking him to become something else. I'm asking him to be principled, because if you don't think you're in your Liberal caucus, then what the hell are you doing in the caucus? Sit as an independent. Send a message to these ne'er-do-wells who run this country at the moment from their various villas or whatever vacation they're on, like that other MP who spent over $200,000 waltzing around the country with her family because she thought she was entitled to this. What kind of this is kind of highway robbery that's going on. I mean, the amount of I mean, digress for 1 second, but the amount of corruption that's been going on in this government for the last couple of years is just beyond the pale, absolutely beyond the pale. And I'm very, very concerned that when we have a federal police force that hasn't yet charged anybody with anything on all these various scandals, you have to really wonder what is in store for this country going forward. Because there are just a whole lot of things that are astonishingly crooked, and no one seems to get any time in front of a magistrate to explain how this happened.
Well, we've talked about the courts before too. And I'm not sure they're the answer, but
you got to get them to court.
you got to get
We're not even doing that. I mean, this monkey business that goes on with these committees is simply outrageous. You know, like I said, if they take the 3 months off because, you know, we're so tired working, doing the people's business.
Well, that's right. And with their salaries, they make what, 2 or 3 times what Statistics Canada say the average person makes. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, these people, you know what they used to say about lawyers at the bottom of the sea? A good start. Well, I think they should be joined by some of these politicians. And so,
Yeah.
you know, if we start off our today's broadcast are looking for good news, sadly, there is no good news, because if you look to these people for direction, if you look to these people for their wisdom, like, what a stupid thing to say, with their wisdom, because what am I talking about? But you know, it's just so unbelievably frustrating that these people are doing what they're doing.
Somewhere along the line, we need to get back integrity into the vocabulary.
Whoa, that's the I word, integrity.
Well, we've already run through a whole bunch of U's, so let's look for something.
How about the P word, principles?
Well, that might be confusing.
How about the H word, honesty?
Well, we might be getting into something there, but if you just went with the IP, people might consider it's a tech job and not want it. But if you go with an HIP, because you could be hip, people might buy into that.